Good evening. So, this past week, one of the big things that was on the House floor is Puerto Rico. It's been the subject. And a bill was passed in the House giving Puerto Rico three options for their future: one, to become a state; two, to become independent; and three, to become a sovereign. There's no option to stay the way it is right now. And this seems like a good idea. I mean, they pay taxes, but they don't have full benefits that we have here in the United States. But is it really a good thing? I mean, after all, Republicans and Democrats both are known for sneaking stuff into bills that really are not a good idea, but they get passed anyway. Let's go to the House floor and see the debate. And keep in mind, there's only two people debating for a reason. Emergency powers granted to Nancy Pelosi back during COVID have not been relinquished. So most of the Republicans and Democrats on the House floor are voting by proxy, which means they never bother to show up anyway. So there's really no debate here. But let's check out what was said and what did happen.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, yesterday the Rules Committee met and reported a rule, House Resolution 1519, providing for consideration of H.R. 8393, the Puerto Rico Status Act, under a closed rule. Puerto Rico's current status prevents the island from enjoying full democracy at the national level. Puerto Rico's delegate to Congress has limited voting rights, and the Puerto Rican people cannot vote in U.S. presidential elections, even though the U.S. government enacts and enforces their national laws and residents pay federal taxes. Puerto Rico also cannot set its own monetary, trade, or immigration policy. They are unable to join international organizations or enter into international agreements, highlighting the complicated implications of the island's current status as a territory. Look, it is time Congress recognizes that Puerto Rico has no interest in being a colony, just as we in the United States should have no interest in being a colonizing power in the year 2022. We are here today to consider a rule that would bring H.R. 8393, the Puerto Rico Status Act, to the floor. This bill details the transition to and the implementation of a non-territory status for Puerto Rico, finally giving the people of Puerto Rico a choice to determine their own status. It tasks the Puerto Rico State Elections Commission to carry out a nonpartisan campaign to educate and inform voters before holding a referendum for Puerto Ricans to decide between statehood, independence, or independence followed by free association with the United States.
Good night.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the distinguished chairman and my good friend from Massachusetts for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, the rule before us today provides for consideration of H.R. 8393, the Puerto Rico Status Act. This is a bill that received an emergency rules hearing yesterday with just 3 hours notice. 3 hours for an issue that deserves to be heard through regular order. H.R. 8393 would authorize a federally sponsored, taxpayer-funded election to be held in Puerto Rico on 5 November 2023. This election would require the voters of Puerto Rico to choose between three status options: independence, sovereignty and free association, or U.S. statehood. You might notice something missing here. This bill doesn't even give Puerto Ricans the option to preserve their current status as a territory of the United States. So not only do House Democrats want to control how the states run their elections, they now want to control how Puerto Rico runs their elections. H.R. 8393 even takes things a step further than that. If Puerto Ricans vote to become a sovereign or independent nation, this legislation tells them what they have to include in their new constitution, how they have to ratify their constitution, and how elections for government officers should take place. And my friends across the aisle want to talk about colonial power. What's that sound like? Further, this bill would completely circumvent congressional authority by not allowing Congress to ratify the option that Puerto Rico ultimately chooses. The question of Puerto Rico statehood is a serious topic, one that I'm not necessarily opposed to. but it's a topic that deserves a deliberative process with careful consideration and expert input. There have been numerous hearings on this issue. There were no hearings on this specific bill. There's been no vetting of legal implications of using this unprecedented self-executing process to statehood. This is not a question that should be rammed through a lame duck Congress on the last day of a scheduled session with less than 24 hours notice. That's unacceptable. And I'm not debating the merits of Puerto Rican statehood, but I am pointing out the glaring problems in this ill-conceived, half-baked legislation that leaves too many questions unanswered. House Democrats are doing nothing more today than using Puerto Ricans as pawns to score cheap political points with a bill that has zero chance of becoming law. Let's just be frank and honest about that. This bill has zero chance of becoming law this session of Congress. It's a joke that we're even considering it today. We owe it to the voters of Puerto Rico to do better than this. They deserve more. I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
All right, so as you can see, Democrats seem to have pulled a little bit of a fast one, and the Republicans are not happy about it. So what are the terms that it must include in the Constitution if they go out on their own? I mean, Democrats are taking a little bit of some leeway here, and I've got it for reference right here next to me. So some of these sound really great. But keep in mind that anything that they do has to come back to a committee here in the United States before anything can be ratified and dealt with. But 1, due process and equal protection under the law. 2, freedom of speech, press, assembly, association, and religion. I think I can agree with every one of those things. Why not? The rights of the accused. Any other economic, social, cultural rights as constitutional convention may deem appropriate and necessary, and 5, provisions to ensure no individual born in the nation of Puerto Rico shall be stateless at birth. Now this goes along with whether they become a sovereign or an independent. Either way. Now, quite frankly, my problem with this is, and I think Republicans have it as well, is number 1, this bill was dropped in their lap with like 3 hours of notification and no debates. And needless to say, AOC, who was pro tempore, smiled ear to ear as it was passed. But who are we as a country, as a nation, to dictate to Puerto Rico what they can or cannot have in their constitution? Who are we? Who are we to say these are the only routes you're allowed to take? And then again, who are we to dictate and say, well, if somebody from another country is born in Puerto Rico, they have to be considered a citizen? The full bill is online. You guys can go to congress.gov to get to that bill and read the whole thing. And it even talks about them possibly becoming a state should they choose that option. But all of these are rules that are provided to them by the United States. They have to be obeyed and followed. If you are from Puerto Rico, I would definitely like to hear from you on this subject. And just go ahead and comment in the comments whether you think the United States, and more specifically the creators of the bill, the Democratic Party, should have any say in what you become, what your nation becomes. For all we know, the people of Puerto Rico want to be a communist, socialist republic with a hint of democracy peppered in. These are for the people to decide, not for us. I'm Lab, and that's the news for this segment. We'll catch you next time. You guys be sure to like, subscribe, and share.